Hello. Today I would like to supplement the lesson that you are reading with a discussion on an alternative approach to moral development. Your lesson here, provided by Rio Salado, covers moral development from the viewpoint of a psychologist named Lawrence Kohlberg. And Kohlberg's theory is well respected and taught consistently in ethics classes to this day. However, there has been much criticism to Kohlberg's thought, and one of his most vocal critics was actually a student of his at Harvard. Her name is Carol Gilligan. She's best known for her innovative but really controversial ideas on the moral development of women. Gilligan emphasized what she calls an ethics of care, which she contrasted to Kohlberg's approach, which she labeled an ethic of justice. And she claims that Kohlberg's ideas discriminate against women because A, Kohlberg used exclusively male subjects, and B, it's in Gilligan's view, Kohlberg is ethnocentric. The key takeaways from Gilligan's ethics of care is that she claims that women's morality rises out of real situations, not out of theoretical situations. She came up with 3 stages of moral development, and you might want to take these down in your notes so that you can compare with Kohlberg's readings. The first is the pre-conventional stage. Women are focused on themselves. At the conventional stage, women have come to focus on their responsibilities towards other people. And at the post-conventional stage, Gilligan taught that a woman has learned to see herself and others as interdependent. Gilligan developed her thinking again in response to the stages of moral development that you will read about in your lesson, outlined by Lawrence Kohlberg. She insisted that these were gender biased, and as I mentioned a moment ago, she thought that they emphasized an ethic of justice. And after you read Kohlberg's theory, you might make a decision for yourself after listening to me speak about an ethic of care. When you read Kohlberg's theory, you will see that it includes 6 stages. At its highest stage, an individual develops a deeply held, self-directed set of moral principles. Like Gilligan, Kohlberg begins with a basic follow the rules, kind of a lollipop in exchange for good behavior stage. The middle stage, which most teenagers and adults work at, is follow the rules because rules are written to be followed and to keep everyone safe. And then the 5th and 6th stage of moral development is one where the individual is more important than the rule. And his most famous case, the Heinz dilemma, a man has to make a decision about whether to steal some medication for his dying wife. And the higher one goes up the stages of moral development, the more one can see that the life of the wife supersedes whatever laws there are about stealing. However, Gilligan points out that the research that Kohlberg did to get to this point used only male subjects. And even though Kohlberg claimed that somehow men were morally superior to women, Gilligan says no. The reason women scored lower in some of the stages is that Kohlberg's work discounts women's voices altogether. Her seminal work is called In a Different Voice, published in 1982. If you're interested in reading further, you might want to take a look at that. Men, as exemplified by Kohlberg's theory, tend to look at morality through the lens of rights, laws, and universally applied principles. The ethics of justice has traditionally been viewed as the ideal in a patriarchal Western society because it's championed by men. However, women tend to look at morality through a lens of relationships, according to Carol Gilligan. Relationships, compassion, and responsibility to others. This ethics of care has often been overlooked because of the limited power that women have had in Western societies. When I taught ethics at a nursing college, often the remark was made that Kohlberg's theories seem to apply to physicians, predominantly male, and the ethics of care, Carol Gilligan's, to nurses, because the focus of nursing is on caretaking and taking care of others, regardless of the gender of the practitioner. And it was really interesting to listen to students, all of them student nurses, although some of them were pre-med, and hear that indeed they felt that men and women that were practicing physicians were much more focused on results and on fairness and on an equitable distribution of services, whereas those men and women focused on nursing were much more interested in caretaking, in comforting, and in treating the whole person. So I always found that there is validity to both sides of the discussion. And I just thought that it was kind of interesting. Gilligan's stages of moral development, as I mentioned before, kind of follow the same pattern as Kohlberg's. The pre-conventional level is the most basic. This is where women are focused on themselves and emphasize their own self-interests over other considerations. At the conventional stage, women come to focus on their responsibilities towards other people. They're concerned with care for others, for being selfless, but this position is defined by society or other people in the woman's orbit: marriage, family, motherhood, those kinds of issues. Moral decision making moral decisions being made at this level are typically reflective of society or of individuals in that woman's orbit. The third stage, and the most elevated stage in Carol Gilligan's approach, is the post-conventional. A woman has learned to see herself and others as interdependent. Women have control of their lives and have responsibility for their decisions, a big part of which is the choice to care for others. Again, highly intelligent, headed for PhDs in nursing, men and women, making the choice that the whole person is more important than the individual specific ill, more typical of the men and women headed for medical degrees. The question of can the ethics of care extend to men, while it was developed on research with women, Gilligan has insisted that the ethics of care and the ethics of justice aren't mutually exclusive. Instead of focusing on gender, Gilligan preferred to focus on different themes brought up by these two perspectives on morality. Although this meant that men could develop an ethics of care, Gilligan indicated that it was much more likely to be more common among women. And again, my own just lived experience teaching nursing students and nurses kind of indicates that the majority of them tended to be women, although more and more, increasingly, there are men joining that profession. Despite the evidence that supports some of Gilligan's ideas, they've also been criticized. One critique states that her observations are the result of societal expectations of gender, rather than those that naturally arise from gender. Thus, if societal expectations were different for women, the moral orientation of males and females would also be different. My personal contention, if you will, is that there are societal observations for men and for women that men and women increasingly are choosing to follow depending on their own personal inclinations. My examples of the physicians and the nurses, I think, amply illustrate that. Feminist psychologists are also divided over Gilligan's work. Some have praised it, but some say that it just reinforces the whole idea that women are traditionally nurturers, and that femininity and caring for others are synonymous. I'm not sure how accurate that is, although, again, I do think that an ethics of care and an ethics of justice both exist and both are complementary. And I close by asserting that I believe that they are both available to men as well as to women. Thank you for listening, and I encourage you to look further into both Kohlberg's theory of moral development, which is in your module, as well as to perhaps pick up some of Gilligan's work. It is highly readable and very, very interesting. Thank you.